The rain was slapping the windshield like it wanted in. I was dead tired, crawling down County 12 with the wipers dragging like a slow metronome, when I saw her. She stepped into the high beams from the shoulder, wet, limping, dragging a worn-out army duffel like it owed her money. One leg stiff, right side. She didn't flinch at the lights. I eased off the gas. My foot did it before my brain caught up. That was my dad in me. He always stopped, even when it was stupid. I cracked the window and leaned toward the storm. "Ma'am, you okay?" She didn't move for a second, then stepped just close enough to see her face. Chin up, jaw set, eyes sharp. Water poured off her jacket. She said her name was Maris, and she was fine. She wasn't. Quick note. Before we start, share in the comments. How's your day going, and where are you joining from? And let's continue. She didn't ask for help, but I saw the brace under her soaked pant leg and the long silver scar down her knee that caught my dash light like a blade. It looked old but angry. I kept my voice steady. "I'm headed past the turnoff. Hop in if that helps." She gave the back seat a hard look, like she'd been trained to scan before stepping in. Then she got in, quiet, controlled. I didn't talk much. Heater on full, both hands on the wheel. She watched the side mirror the same way I do when I'm running fares at night, like something might follow you home. We passed Miller's Creek, long flat stretch, no lights for a mile either way. That's when she spoke again. "Discharged last month," she said. "Honorable." Short and flat, like a report she'd given a dozen times. Then nothing else. I didn't ask more. I've got one rule. If someone wants you to know, they'll tell you. Otherwise, stay out of it. Pulled up at my place. Low farmhouse with a sagging porch and 3 stubborn steps. My dad left it to me, along with a few acres and a bunch of headaches. Lights were off except for the one in Toby's room upstairs. My boy's 8. He keeps a shoebox under his bed full of what he calls important things. A Hot Wheels car with 1 wheel, some rocks, a movie ticket from 3 years ago. Treasure, if you ask him. I said, "Couch is yours for the night, just tonight." She nodded. I handed her a folded quilt and poured hot water over some mint leaves. I didn't offer tea bags. I don't drink 'em, don't keep 'em. She sat stiff, didn't touch the cup. Didn't need to. Just the steam helped. Toby wandered out later, hair flattened on one side, dragging his blanket, stared at her a second, then held it out. "You want this?" he asked. "It's the lucky one." She shook her head once. "I'm good, kid." He tucked it on the armrest anyway, like it was a mission he wasn't going to argue about. I didn't sleep much. Habit, I guess. She didn't make a sound all night. Come morning, the couch was empty. Quilt folded sharp, cup rinsed and turned upside down. No note, no goodbye. But she'd left something behind. On the counter, 2 things, side by side. A purple heart with the ribbon dulled from time, and a cloth unit patch with a Velcro name strip. Callaway. I picked them up. They were heavier than they looked, heavier than they should have been. I stood there holding them while the kettle clicked off behind me. Then I wrapped them in one of my dad's old handkerchiefs and dropped them into the junk drawer, the one that never gets cleaned out. 3 days later, the envelope showed up like a punch that lands late. Plain paper, bank logo, my name spelled right, which somehow made it worse. I stood at the counter with it open while Toby built a crooked fort out of cereal boxes on the kitchen floor, narrating a battle I wasn't following. Foreclosure proceedings started. 30 days. The land was paid off clean. The house wasn't. Last winter, when the roof started leaking in 2 rooms and my client work slowed, I took a small loan to stay afloat. 2 clients paid late. 1 paid half. The math went sideways, and I missed a step climbing back out. I read the letter twice. Slow. Then once more fast, like the words might change if I rushed them. They didn't. Toby popped his head up from the fort and asked if I liked his drawbridge idea. I told him it looked strong. I didn't tell him anything else. I couldn't. He went back to stacking boxes, humming to himself, and I folded the letter so tight it creased my thumb. I drove into town for my day client, a small property office wedged between a barber and a bakery that smells like sugar even when it's closed. I was supposed to review a setback diagram, but I stared through the paper like it had answers hidden under the ink. Jessa Klein caught me doing it. She's 34, sharp-eyed, no wasted words. She leaned on the edge of my desk and waited until I noticed her. "You're somewhere else," she said. "That's not like you." I told her about the letter. I told her about the woman in the rain too, but I kept it tight. No speeches, no feelings, just facts. Jessa didn't flinch. She didn't tell me I should have known better or asked why I took the loan. She nodded once and said, "All right, let's fix what we can and you'll breathe through the rest." That sentence did more than the coffee in my hand. I went home early, stomach hollow, mind loud. The sheriff rolled up before I could even kill the engine. Orrin Pritchard stepped out slow, hat square, smile polite in a way that felt practiced. He rested one hand on his belt and looked around my porch like he was inventorying it. "Benton," he said, "just stopping by neighbor to neighbor." I didn't invite him up. I stayed on the step. He said folks notice things in a small town. Said he'd heard I'd had company the other night and that it was probably nothing, but it didn't hurt to be careful about who you invite home. He said he was looking out for me. Then he mentioned my address had popped up on the bank's publicly posted default list. Said that kind of thing can cause confusion, especially when property lines get fuzzy and people start asking questions. "I'm just trying to prevent disputes," he said, "before they start." He slid a single page across the porch rail, called it a voluntary understanding, said it was on behalf of the County Planning Commission, a courtesy delivery, not enforcement. The paper talked about clarifying backlot boundaries while the bank sorted matters. Signing it would show good faith, avoid confusion. My gut tightened hard enough to pull my shoulders back. "I need time," I said. His smile didn't move, but his eyes did. "Of course, just don't wait too long. These things have a way of moving on their own." He tipped his hat and drove off like he'd done me a favor. I stood there with the paper flapping in the breeze and didn't pick it up until it hit my boot. After dark, I drove 6 hours of fares. Rain came back, steady and mean. Around midnight, I picked up a county clerk I'd hauled before. He put his buddy on speaker and started talking shop like I wasn't there. "Mayfield's got their ducks lined up on Maple Hollow backlots," the buddy said. "Timing's clean." The clerk laughed and said something about paperwork grease. Neither of them knew I was listening. I kept my mouth shut and my eyes on the road. I dropped them off and drove another hour with nothing on the radio. The next morning, the mailbox post was tagged. Thick black letters sprayed sloppy and fast. "Stay in your lane." I didn't stop. I kept Toby moving past it, one hand on his shoulder, talking about breakfast like nothing was wrong. I told him it was a dumb joke. He looked at it once, then up at me, and nodded. He never makes me lie twice. Later, when the house was quiet, I stood at the junk drawer and pulled out the handkerchief. The Purple Heart sat heavy in my palm. The ribbon looked tired. The patch with Callaway stared back like it was waiting for orders. I don't spook easy, but that metal made my hands steady in a way coffee never does. I whispered a thank you to a person who wasn't there. It felt foolish. I did it anyway. Jessa called that afternoon. She said to bring every letter, payment stub, email, and notice I had. She said she'd build a calendar, show the bank I'd stayed engaged the whole time. "Momentum matters," she said, "even when the numbers are ugly." I laid everything out on the table after dinner, papers spread like a bad map. Toby asked if he could help. I told him to keep guard of his fort. He saluted and took the job serious. That night, sleep came in scraps. Every creak sounded like a knock I didn't want to answer. Every real knock in my dreams sounded like a goodbye I wasn't ready to hear. Sometime before dawn, I got up, folded the sheriff's paper once, and slid it under a stack of old manuals by the fridge, then set my keys on top of it like a weight. I'd barely finished stacking the papers when a beige sedan eased into the drive. Slow, deliberate, like the driver didn't want to be mistaken for someone selling insurance or collecting a signature. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stepped outside. The man in the navy jacket came out first, hair combed neat, folder in hand, shoes too clean for gravel. "Lyle Mercer," he said. "Veteran Assistance Services. You must be Mr. Cross." I nodded, but didn't offer my hand. The door opened again, and Maris stepped out behind him, moving careful but tall. She was in clean jeans, a jacket zipped halfway, hair pulled back. That stiff leg of hers still hit the ground hard, but she walked like she meant to. I held the door and stepped aside. Maris went in first. Lyle followed, scanning the room the way people do when they've been trained to read the details. His folder hit the table like it had weight beyond the paper inside. "I understand your home's under foreclosure," he said. His voice was steady, no fluff. "Maris listed your address on an incident intake. Based on the timing, her status, and your circumstances, there's a strong chance we can qualify you for an emergency housing microgrant." I stared at him. "What kind of grant?" He opened the folder and showed me a paper with a blue seal and bold lettering. "It's a county-backed fund. When a resident offers temporary shelter to a veteran in crisis, and that resident's housing is at risk due to verified hardship, the grant can step in and pay the arrears. The bank then rescinds the foreclosure action." I crossed my arms. "You're telling me because she stayed one night, my mortgage gets saved?" Lyle didn't blink. "Not because she stayed, because she was discharged, documented, and flagged as high risk, and because you offered shelter without obligation. That counts in a system like this." I looked over at Maris. She hadn't said a word. Just stood there, arms loose at her sides, watching me like she was waiting to see which version of me showed up. The one who keeps carrying weight until something breaks, or the one smart enough to accept backup. She finally nodded toward the drawer. "You still got what I left?" I opened it without answering and pulled out the old handkerchief. The Purple Heart and the patch were still wrapped the same way I'd folded them days ago. I set them down on the table. Maris stepped forward, picked them up without hesitation, and slid them into her coat pocket, like they were finally back where they belonged. Then she stepped back, gave me the smallest nod, and went quiet again. Lyle turned the tablet around and slid it across to me. "I need your signature in 3 places. I'll verify ID, log timestamps, and notify the bank that the review's in process. You'll get a confirmation email once the rescission's scheduled." I didn't move. "I want to read every line." "Please do," he said. "We want this clean." I read it out loud, every clause, every section that gave authority or assumed something. Lyle didn't rush me. When you've been cornered once, you learn how the corners work. When I was done, I signed. He tapped his tablet and said, "The system should update within a week once the bank confirms payment. You'll get formal rescission notice from both them and the county office. We'll also notify the recorder's office to flag the property as pending grant resolution. That'll block most title transfers while it's processing." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "And if someone tries to move papers quietly while all that's happening?" Lyle smiled for the first time, not wide, but enough. "They won't be quiet for long. We notify everyone at once. Every filing leaves a trail." They stood to go. Maris was first to the door this time. No goodbye, just a small glance back. Enough to let me know she'd done what she came to do. I waited till their car was halfway down the road, then called Jessa. As soon as I said the words, "Grant approved," she let out a whoop that blew out the speaker. I had to hold the phone away. Then I made the second call, to Sheriff Pritchard. I kept it short. "I won't be signing anything on my back lot, Sheriff. Just figured I'd save you the trouble of another visit." There was a pause. Then, "No need to make this harder than it needs to be." "It's not hard," I said. "It's just over." I hung up. That evening, Toby brought me one of his drawings, a tin roof house with a big tree next to it, and a dog that looked like a bear. Underneath, in uneven block letters, he'd written, "Stay." He tucked it under his bed, in the shoebox labeled "Important." Right between his lucky quarter and a broken slingshot he won't throw away. I didn't say anything, just kissed the top of his head and went out back. In the shed, I pulled out Dad's old binder. The cover was cracked at the corners, water-stained and half-gutted. Inside was his usual mess: receipts, plant schedules, fencing plans. But about halfway through, I found a hand-drawn map, yellowed with time, dated 1998. It showed our lot, with notations scribbled in pencil. Fence lines, tomato rows, a little circle where the oak used to be. It was labeled "Back Plot," shared rows in his blocky handwriting. I took that binder inside and set it on the counter. It wasn't clutter anymore. It was proof. Past midnight, with the house quiet and the lights low, I grabbed a fresh notebook and wrote one word at the top of the first page: Mayfield. Big letters, underlined twice. Toby came out in his pajamas and caught me hunched over the notebook. "You writing homework?" he asked, rubbing his eye. "Something like that," I said. "We're making a list." He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and went back to bed. But before he did, he said, "We should put Grandpa's binder in the important box. It can't get lost now." We slid the binder into the shoebox together and carried it out to the shed. I set it on the top shelf, center, right where it'd stare me in the face if I ever forgot what we were fighting for. Then I shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and pulled the porch light cord. The Planning Commission letter showed up folded too neatly, the kind of crease that says, "Don't worry, this is just a chat," but smells like a setup. The word clarification jumped out in bold. My gut knew better. Monday morning, I put on clean jeans and my dad's old belt, the one that used to ride too low when I was 20 and thought being right was enough. The meeting was held in a government annex with dead plants and vending machines that swallowed your quarters without apology. I walked into room 3 and found Vance Ronalds already waiting. 39, clean shave, slick part in his hair, 2 leather folders on the table, and a grin like he practiced it in the mirror until it stopped looking like effort. "Mr. Cross," he said, standing like we were at a golf tournament. "Glad you came in. These things go smoother face to face." I didn't shake his hand. I sat. He opened the folder and started his pitch like we were old buddies. "There's been some consolidation on the county records," he said. "Some legacy parcel inconsistencies. A small slice of your back lot has a historic lien. Goes back to the early 1970s. It was picked up last year by Mayfield Redevelopment." I stared at him. My dad tilled that land, planted trees, ran a string line for a fence in 2002. He gave a little shrug, like he respected that, but couldn't do much about it. "I understand, but on paper, the lien was valid and it transferred. Nothing aggressive, just paperwork cleanup." Then he slid another folder across the table, this one thinner, with one page already turned toward me. "This is a temporary access agreement. Just allows our team to do a surface-level appraisal. Nothing about ownership, just an easement for survey." I didn't touch it. "You already have the title from the lien, right? What do you need an appraisal for?" "Standard process," he said. "We're prepping parcels for zoning review. Might be mixed use or green space, depending on planning outcomes. Again, this doesn't affect your primary residence." He tapped the signature line like it owed him money. "This is goodwill, Benton. Just helps the next steps stay friendly." He had that voice. Low, casual, like we were old high school teammates and he was cutting me in on something lucky. That's when I knew for sure he was trying to box me in. If it was nothing, he wouldn't be here smiling. I didn't sign. "I'll need a copy," I said. His smile didn't drop, but the corners of his mouth stopped meaning it. "Of course. Clerk will get that for you." The woman in the corner, mid-50s, hair pulled back tight, hadn't said a word the whole time. She moved now, like she wanted to disappear into the filing cabinet behind her. As soon as I stepped out into the hallway, I called Jessa. Good, she said before I could finish. Bring everything. We'll build a timeline wall and brew coffee strong enough to strip paint. The courthouse doors hadn't even swung shut behind me when I knew Pritchard would show up next. Sure enough, I wasn't 3 steps from my own porch before the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the drive. He didn't get out right away. When he did, he moved slow, leaned on the hood like he'd built the car himself. "Benton," he said, "I heard you had a meeting this morning." "I did," I said. "It didn't end with me signing over my soul." He ignored that. "Mayfield's good for the county, brings in dollars, fixes up lots. You could get ahead of this. Be practical." "Practical is keeping the dirt I'm planning to be buried in." He didn't like that. His jaw flexed once, like he was grinding down the reply. Then he handed me the same understanding form from before, except this time, there was a new paragraph. Something about cooperation and mutual benefit. I didn't even read it. Just took the paper and turned to unlock my door. That night, after Toby brushed his teeth and packed away his action figures, he climbed up on my lap holding something small and square. "Found this in Grandpa's seed box," he said, handing it over. It was a Polaroid. My dad, in a ball cap, standing next to a taut string line across the fence line. No trees yet, just freshly dug rows and a rolled-up hose behind him. Date in the corner, June 12th, 2002. My dad's writing, blocky and deliberate. I stared at it a long minute, then laid it beside the binder on the kitchen table. I flipped to the page with the hand-drawn map, fence lines and garden rows just like in the photo. My eyes tracked the notes. One section was labeled, Community Rows, Vet Share. There were no hearts or smiley faces, just plain pencil strokes and one clean square of land marked with an arrow. If emojis had been a thing back then, Dad would have drawn a thumbs up. I put the photo in a Ziploc bag, sealed it tight, and slid it behind the binder cover. I didn't have to say anything to Toby. He watched me do it and nodded, like we'd both just agreed to something bigger than ourselves. Next morning, I made a fresh pot of coffee, grabbed the folder Vance had slid across the table, and drove it straight to Jessa's office. She had the whiteboard ready, Post-its lined up like soldiers, and a Sharpie in her hand like it was a sword. "We're going to build this wall tight," she said. "If they want confusion, let's give them sequence instead." I handed her the appraisal form. She read it once and snorted. "This doesn't smell like zoning. This smells like acquisition in disguise." I didn't disagree. We spent the next 2 hours organizing papers, sorting dates, connecting dots. She pointed to the corner of the whiteboard. "This is where we're going to nail them, Benton. Pattern of pressure plus fake goodwill. That's what this is." When I got home that night, I noticed the edge of the back fence had been disturbed. A single marker flag stuck up where there hadn't been one yesterday. Bright orange, fluttering like it belonged. I yanked it out and threw it in the fire pit. Then I went back inside and slid the new understanding sheet from the sheriff into the same drawer where the first one went. Now it had company. I sharpened a pencil, drew a box around Community Rows on Dad's map, and underlined it twice. Let them come. It was the wind that tipped me off. Dry, fast, sliding under the doorframe like it wanted in. I'd crashed on the couch after a 6-hour shift, and my head had barely hit the throw pillow when the light changed. The room flickered orange, not TV blue, not sunset gold, fire orange, alive and mean. I shot up and yanked the curtain back. The old shack behind the fence line was lit up like a bonfire, flames curling fast across the roof, licking dry brush that hadn't seen rain in weeks. The fire wasn't wandering. It was marching. I didn't think. I just moved. Boots first, then Toby. I scooped him from his blanket pile and carried him like a sack of grain to the truck, threw open the passenger side, shoved him inside, and slammed the door before he could argue. He was asking what was wrong. I didn't answer. I grabbed my phone with one hand and hit 911 while I ran. "Structure fire. Backlot behind residence," I said. "It's pushing toward a second building. We need units now." Dispatch said 15 to 20 minutes. We didn't have 10. I sprinted to the shed. That binder was in there, Dad's map, the Polaroid, the shoebox backup, all of it. Heat slapped my face before I even reached the door. The air had gone sour and hot, full of smoke. I coughed once and tasted metal. My eyes watered instantly. I yanked the door open and grabbed the binder. The shoebox was wedged beside it. I grabbed that too. Flames weren't far. The shack cracked behind me as wood gave out. That's when tires screamed on the gravel out front. A black pickup fishtailed to a stop. Doors flung open before the engine even died. Soren and Drew, two CERT volunteers I'd met briefly at a town hall once, ran straight for the fence. Maris came limping behind them, fast but locked in. She didn't wait for permission. Winds from the west. Burns angling toward the shed. You, get a perimeter trench cut. You, crack the hose now. Soren didn't hesitate. He yanked a canvas hose reel from the truck bed. Drew grabbed my spade and a hoe off the porch without asking. They moved like they'd drilled this for years. Maris yanked a folded tarp from the cab and headed toward the flames with a grip like steel. Her leg barely bent, but she adjusted, kept weight forward, eyes always on the line. She moved fast, like she didn't have time to hurt. Soren got the hose going, barely a trickle at first, then pressure. Drew hit the dirt, cutting a fire break near the base of the fence. They didn't yell or waste energy. It was all motion and urgency. Then I heard the truck door slam. Toby. I turned and saw him out, barefoot, clutching something against his chest, running toward the shed. The fire was maybe 30 feet out, close enough to feel. "No!" I roared, dropping the box. I ran, but Maris reached him first. She didn't shout. She didn't grab. She just threw her jacket over his back, turned her bad leg into the fire's angle, and wrapped him with both arms. A dry limb fell near them with a loud snap, close enough to throw sparks. She took the weight with her shoulder and twisted, pulling him with her. They hit the ground hard, clear of the danger line. By the time I reached them, Toby was crying and clutching his shoebox like treasure. Maris looked up, breathing hard, eyes wild for a second. I pulled them both to their feet, wrapped one arm around each, and staggered backward. Soren turned the hose on the edge of the flames, water hissing against heat. Drew kept cutting, low and fast. The smell of burning paint and old lumber filled my lungs. Sirens finally echoed down the hill. Too far to matter now, but close enough to know we'd survived the worst of it. Fire trucks rolled up just as the flames were breaking and smoke thickened low. A lieutenant jumped down and barked orders. Crews moved in, but the edges were already black and wet. "You got lucky," the lieutenant said, scanning the fence. I shook my head. "Luck wears a brace and carries a tarp." Maris didn't say a word. She just limped back toward the truck and sat on the bumper, breathing through her nose like she was willing herself to stop shaking. Joanne Lex came across the street, robe pulled tight, one slipper missing. Her voice was shaking, but she was loud enough to be heard. "I saw her," she said. "The woman. She ran straight into it, grabbed the boy. No hesitation." People heard her. I saw it. Neighbors who hadn't made eye contact in weeks suddenly did. Faces turned, shoulders eased a little. Nobody clapped or gave speeches, but something in the air settled different. We stood like that for a minute, quiet, watching the smoke thin and the fire finally lose its teeth. Back inside, once Toby was safe and dry and wrapped in his lucky blanket, I opened the shoebox. Inside was Dad's binder, still warm from the shed but untouched. Next to it, the Polaroid of him with the string line, and 3 rocks Toby swears are from the moon, collected near the creek out back. My hands trembled, not from fear, from the weight of it all still sitting on top of me. Later, after the crews packed up and the road went still again, I walked the fence line with a flashlight. There, near the back corner, I found the start point. Charred wood, blackened earth, but cleaner than it should have been. A small patch with no debris, no spread, like something had helped it catch and hold, just long enough to leap. Next morning, the crew's report listed the cause as undetermined. Wind, fuel, structure too old to survive, could be anything, maybe it was, maybe not. The lieutenant stuck around a few minutes longer than he had to. He stood at the fence, running a finger along the burn line. He looked at me and said, "Keep your eyes open. This one picked its night." I nodded. I didn't ask for more. I already had enough. Back inside, Maris sat at the kitchen table, one leg stretched, a wet rag pressed to her shoulder. She didn't want thanks, didn't ask for anything. Just nodded once when Toby placed the shoebox next to her and said, "You're allowed to look inside if you want." She didn't open it. She just tapped the lid once and said, "That's a good box." And for the first time since the rain, I saw her smile. Just a crack, but real. Monday morning, Maris knocked on the door like she already knew I'd be up. She had coffee in one hand, a new knee sleeve in the other. She held both out without a word, then finally said, "Thanks." Like I was the one who took the hit. I frowned. "For what?" "You saved my kid." She didn't answer, just handed me a card from her jacket pocket. Off-white, crisp, calm logo at the top. "Renata Pierce," she said. "She handles land and veteran cases. Doesn't flinch when men in ties posture." I turned the card over. Plain text. No tagline, no cheesy promise. Just a number and an email. By noon, Renata was on my porch. She didn't waste air. Slim, maybe 51, gray blazer, flats, eyes like a scanner. She stepped inside and pointed to the kitchen table. "Give me everything," she said. "No order needed. Just stack it." I laid it all out. Letters, notices, the sheriff's understanding, the 4 appraisal sheet from Vance, Dad's binder, the Polaroid, the Planning Commission invite. She didn't pause. Just read, noted, highlighted with a pen that had no cap. She marked fast, circled harder. "This note here," she said, tapping a spot on Dad's map. "Community Rose, vet share. Dated, legible, consistent with use. That's a strong start." She pulled out her laptop like it was a weapon. "I'll be filing 2 records requests by tonight. One for the Planning Commission's communication logs and parcel reviews, and one for internal memos between zoning, redevelopment, and the sheriff's office." I raised an eyebrow. "They'll just scrub 'em." She didn't look up. "People clean what they think matters. They miss what matters to me." She left in under 40 minutes, didn't even finish her coffee. I stood in the doorway, watching her taillights disappear down the gravel. For once, I didn't feel outmatched. I felt loaded. 3 days later, she was back. Her bag looked heavier. She laid out papers like a dealer laying cards. Each one landed with a quiet slap. "I'm not a lawyer," I told her. "You don't need to be," she said. "This tells a story." She pointed to one email, printed with a timestamp in the header. It was from Sheriff Orrin Pritchard to someone on Mayfield's team. Subject line, "Timing the hearing." The line below, "We may need to accelerate reclassification before the public gets wind." Farther down, another email, forwarded by Vance, same thread. This one, "If we don't move fast, the veteran angle will complicate perception. Best to finalize boundaries ASAP." I leaned forward, hands flat on the table. They knew exactly what they were doing. "They did," she said, "and they left their fingerprints all over it." She placed the binder in front of me and tapped Dad's note again. "This is gold. That's 2002, documented use of the parcel for veteran food support. Joanne's willing to confirm that. Combine that with the foreclosure rescission. We're not just defending your property, we're showing a pattern." That night I was back in the cab, window cracked, air sticky. Around 11:30, I picked up a fare outside the municipal building. Young guy, tie loose, planning department badge clipped to his backpack. Said he was heading to Main and Grove. Didn't take long before he was chatting, one of those types that talks when they think the driver doesn't matter. "All I'm saying is, if the hearing gets too visible, the deputy director's gonna spook," he said. "They've already stalled 2 others over noise. This one needs to stay quiet. The sheriff's got it, though." I didn't blink. Just drove. When I dropped him off, I pulled to the curb, pulled my phone, and texted Jessa. Planning staff. Keep it low profile or the deputy director gets spooked. Her reply came 10 seconds later. On it, looping Renata. Next morning, Renata knocked again. She had a new page in her hand. Her expression was colder than usual. Old memo from the county archives, she said. Dated 2004. Sheriff Pritchard signed off on a tax exemption for that parcel. Reason listed, community support use. She set it next to the newer email thread. One page said he supported the vet rows 20 years ago. The other said he was trying to erase them now. He'll call it a clerical error, she said, but it won't land. She packed it all into a file labeled Cross Parcel Defense. That name made something tighten in my chest. Later that day, Lyle showed up in his agency truck, clean shirt but sleeves rolled. I've got two things, he said, stepping onto the porch. First, here's a signed verification letter from my office. It confirms historical use of your land for a veteran food share project. That's not just opinion. It's agency certified. He handed me the second envelope. And this is the official notice that your foreclosure has been withdrawn, paid in full by the microgrant. Bank signed off. It's done. He shook my hand hard, held it a second too long. You held the line, Benton. Most folks don't. I didn't have words, just nodded. That moment meant more than it looked. That evening, Maris sat on the porch steps, legs stretched, brace peeking under her jeans. The sun had started dropping low behind the house. She looked out toward the fence where the burn still showed under fresh paint. I was in the back of a Civic the week you found me, she said. Back seat smelled like oil and old fries. I'd been parked behind the truck stop for 3 nights. Not a soul looked twice. I stayed quiet. She didn't need prompting. Didn't have the right paperwork for a housing voucher yet, she said. Didn't have the right kind of pain either. They wanted documentation for the knee. I had scars. They wanted scans. I had stories. She glanced over at me. You didn't ask for proof. You just made space. I shook my head. That night I thought I was just keeping the heater on. You were, she said, but you pointed it in my direction. I leaned back, arms over my knees. We're even then. She looked straight at me. Not yet. That was the last thing she said before walking off the porch and heading back toward her borrowed truck. Some people leave like they're unsure if they'll return. Maris left like she was already calculating how to come back when it counted. People like her don't forget, and people like me. Eventually, we stop asking why and just let them keep score. Renata closed her folder and said, We prep now. If we wait, they'll frame the story for us. My kitchen turned into a war room by sundown. Jessa showed up first, sleeves rolled, hair in a knot, coffee in one hand, dry erase markers in the other. She took the whiteboard I'd pulled out of the shed and turned it into Command Central. Dates across the top, events down the side, arrows, bullet points, and one rule in all caps circled 3 times. Don't sign anything. Even if they offer you the moon, she said. Smile and say you need a second opinion. If they push, that means you were right to stall. Renata started grilling me on how to talk, not how to argue, how to speak like a man who'd lived it. You're not a victim, she said, pacing like a teacher. You're a landowner, a father, a neighbor. You don't beg, you state, 10 sentences, nouns and verbs only. I gave it a try. I got 7 in before I wandered off into explanation. No, she snapped. You're explaining. Don't. You don't owe them background. You owe them facts. She made me start again, and again, until it sounded like it came from someone who believed every word. Toby sat on a stool with his little plastic watch, the one that's been stuck on 11:11 for months. He timed me like he was running a science fair. 7 seconds too long, he'd say, then scribble something in his notebook like he was planning a full report. We printed Dad's map in large format at the pharmacy down on Shelby Street. The young clerk squinted at the rolled-out copy and asked if it was art. No, I said. It's memory you can hold. He didn't ask again. Back home, Joanne Lex knocked gently on the screen door and came in with a pie wrapped in foil and a purse that looked older than I was. She stood there a long moment, then said, "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." I offered her a chair. She set the pie down and folded her hands. "I remember your daddy planting tomatoes. Gave some to my husband the summer before he passed. Told him to take more 'cause he didn't like waste." She cleared her throat. "And I'll say what I saw that night. She ran into the fire like she'd trained for it. No fear, just instinct. And you don't forget something like that." "Thank you," I said. "We could use it." Lyle came by the next afternoon to go over how the planning commission usually works, who talks first, what not to assume. "Some of those board folks don't know dirt from drywall," he said. "So keep it plain. You fed veterans, not with a grant, with sweat and a garden hose. Say that." He helped me practice once, stopped me halfway through. "You sound polite," he said. "Stop that. Sound grounded. Speak like the guy who built the fence." I went back to the shed later that night, looking for a couple more of Dad's old records. That's when I found the original understanding sheet the sheriff had dropped off weeks back, folded and shoved behind the microwave, stained from where a coffee cup leaked through it. I brought it back to the table. Renata took one look at it and nodded. "They always leave fingerprints," she said. Later that night, I let Toby pick a movie, but halfway through he got bored and wandered into the kitchen. He came back dragging a flattened pizza box and a pack of markers. By the time I noticed what he was doing, he'd written across the lid in giant letters, "This is our backyard." I didn't correct him. He held it up proudly. "We can put this on the fridge so no one forgets." "You spelled yard with an E," I said, grinning. He shrugged. "I like it better that way." I taped it up like a trophy, badge of honor, right between the overdue water bill and a postcard from my sister in Wisconsin. 2 days before the hearing, Vance left a voicemail. His voice was syrupy, almost bored. "Benton, I've been thinking. There's probably a cleaner way to settle all this. If you're open to a private arrangement, I think we can avoid dragging this into a public record. Call me back, but I'd keep this between us." I didn't call him back. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Renata. She didn't reply right away, just sent back a text. "Let him come to the mic." We cleared the kitchen that night, made a space for the board printouts, Renata's file folders, a binder of everything Lyle had confirmed, and a copy of every single piece of mail I'd gotten since the first foreclosure letter. Jessa took a photo of the board and said, "This is what prep looks like when you're outnumbered and still intent on winning." I looked at the fridge, at the pizza box sign. "This is our backyard," I said aloud. Toby, already curled up on the couch with his blanket, stuck his hand in the air like he was swearing an oath. "It's spelled wrong, but the feeling's right." Jessa smiled. "Kid's not wrong." We didn't pretend we were guaranteed to win, but nobody in that room looked like they were planning to roll over either. The next morning, I stood in the backyard, staring at the patched corner of the fence, the scorched patch of grass still refusing to grow right, and the rows that were just barely starting to green again. I didn't say anything. I just walked the line from end to end, slow and steady, like I was dragging a string in my mind. And when I turned back toward the house, Maris was sitting on the porch steps, quiet as a shadow, sipping coffee like she'd been there for hours. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just lifted her mug like a toast and waited to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. The county planning commission room smelled like floor wax and old folders. The lights buzzed low overhead, and the chairs squeaked if you shifted wrong. I counted 10 people at the front. 4 board members, 1 county recorder, a zoning rep, and the rest probably there to make sure the rest behaved. No flags. Just dry air and eyes that didn't blink much. Renata sat to my left, calm as a chess player. Jessa was 2 seats down with her notepad, her coffee, and that stubborn set to her mouth. I had Dad's map folded neat in my lap, and Toby's pizza box sign still sitting in my truck out front, just in case. Vance sat across the room with his legs crossed and his tie so tight it could have choked a horse. He had 2 folders on the table, both unopened. His suit looked like it had been steamed 5 minutes ago. He didn't look over. Didn't have to. Sheriff Pritchard stood at the back like he'd been assigned security detail. Hat in his hand, fake neutral face on, posture stiff enough to impress a mirror. Renata stood first when they opened the floor. She started with the timeline. Clear, clipped, no fat on the facts. She laid out the foreclosure notice, the rescission, the verified grant. She set down copies of the parcel map from 2002 and the tax exemption memo from 2004 with the sheriff's initials on it. She handed over Joanne Lex's statement, Lyle's letter confirming the veteran food share. Then she paused, looked right at the chairwoman, and slid a printed email chain across the table. These are communications between Sheriff Orrin Pritchard and Vance Ronalds, she said, obtained via public records request. Language includes timing the hearing, accelerate reclassification, and complicate perception. The board members started flipping through the copies. One of them adjusted his glasses 3 times in 30 seconds. Renata stepped back without another word. Vance stood like it was his living room and started spinning words into thread. This is about opportunity, he said. The region needs better density, stronger redevelopment, and long-term planning. The parcel in question is small and underutilized. Legacy records are murky. We're not questioning history, just clarifying access for progress. He turned to the board with the grin of a man used to closing. This is low-value space, he said. We want to elevate the surrounding community. He never looked at me, not once. Renata stepped forward again. Calm voice, hands folded. Are, for appraisal-only agreements, standard in your redevelopment process? Yes, Vance said. How many include clauses that waive objection to zoning changes? He blinked. None, he said, then cleared his throat. Rare, very rare. The room went quiet enough to hear the fluorescent buzz above us. My turn came. I stood. I kept both hands on Dad's map and let my voice do the lifting. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a developer. I'm a dad. I drive a cab, fix roofs, and mow my own fence line. I've lived on that property most of my life. That strip out back? My father planted tomatoes and beans there every summer. He called it Community Rose. Veterans came out. Neighbors, too. Didn't matter who you were. You walked the line and took what you needed. I unfolded the map and held it up. That's his drawing. That's his handwriting. That's the ground he broke. I lowered it and looked around the room. A fence is a line you hold with your back and your time. You don't erase that because someone sees it as low value. That ground fed people. Still does. I sat. Then Joanne Lex stood up in the back, both hands tight on her purse. She didn't need a mic. Her voice hit the front row. I watched a woman run into a fire, she said. She didn't hesitate. Saved that boy. She nodded toward me. Same boy whose grandpa gave my husband tomatoes back in 2003 when he was sick and couldn't garden anymore. Her voice cracked just a little. People can say what they want, she said, but I saw who helps and who talks. She sat without another word. Sheriff Pritchard finally stepped forward, cleared his throat, and asked to clarify the 2004 memo with his signature. It was a provisional note, he said, filed without formal backing. Clerical oversight. Renata didn't move, just stepped to the table, flipped the memo, and read the last line out loud. Use confirmed. No emotion, just words. And then she stepped back, arms crossed, like she was waiting for someone to call her bluff. No one did. The vote came quicker than I expected. All 4 board members looked at each other, nodded like they'd already had the conversation in their heads, and voted down Mayfield's claim. Unanimous. The protected community use designation was restored. They also opened a formal ethics review. 3 words that hit harder than any raised voice. A clerk handed me a stamped copy of the ruling. My hand shook a little when I took it. Not fear, just the release of holding too much for too long. Vance stood, buttoned his coat, and walked past without looking at anyone but me. He gave a single nod like we'd tied. I didn't nod back. Outside, the light was brighter than I remembered. Not better, just sharper, like it had teeth again. A week later, I saw the local station's headline flash across my phone while I was waiting in the carpool line for Toby's school. Sheriff Orrin Pritchard placed on paid administrative leave pending internal inquiry. It wasn't a parade or a takedown, but it was something. The quiet parts had been said out loud, and people listened. The ground still smelled like ash when I started digging. It was a Saturday, and I didn't want help. Didn't mean I didn't get any. I cleared the scorched brush by hand, shoveling out black dirt until the soil came back brown. The fence line had one post still half charred, so I dug it up and replaced it with new cedar. Didn't need it fancy. Just honest. I laid out a basic trellis frame with scrap I had in the shed. Around noon, a truck rolled up. I didn't look up until boots hit gravel. Soren, Drew, and Maris. 3 lengths of reclaimed cedar slung across the truck bed like they'd just pulled them from someone's forgotten project. "Fair trade," Drew said, setting them down. "You gave us coffee and a reason to show up." Maris handed me a bottle of water. Her knee was wrapped better this time, and her face looked like sleep had finally shown up and stayed the night. I built a bench from 2 of those planks right there by the garden rose. Nothing fancy, just sturdy and low to the ground. On the 3rd one, I pulled out my old wood burner and pressed in 2 words, slow and steady. No questions. Jessa came by with lemonade halfway through, looked at the bench and rolled her eyes. "That's your motto now?" she asked, handing me a cup. "It fits," I said. "Folks that get it don't need the rest." She laughed and sat down like the spot had been waiting for her. Later that evening, Lyle showed up in a county vehicle, no badge, off the clock, but still official in his posture. He handed me 2 envelopes, one thicker than the other. "First one is your formal rescission notice," he said. "Foreclosure dismissed, parcel designation confirmed, county seal and everything. And the second? Small fund voucher, seed and soil costs, covered by the wellness grant, veteran program allocation. We figured it was only fair." I took both and nodded. "Appreciate it." He glanced around the yard, eyes landing on the patch where the fire had started. "Still watching that corner?" "Every day," I said. He tipped his head once and left without another word. Not an hour later, I found a grocery sack sitting on the porch step. Brown paper, folded once, tied with twine. No address. Just a note in thick black marker, for the rouse. Inside, a pack of assorted seeds, a pair of leather gloves that had seen work before, and a metal trowel with soil still in the grooves. Whoever left it knew what they were doing. I didn't ask around. The following week, I found 3 crumpled receipts in the mailbox. Property tax donations, small amounts, all anonymous. Little drops in the bucket, but enough to say someone was paying attention. Towns like ours don't apologize in speeches. They do it in produce swaps and gas station gift cards. Toby helped plant the new rows. He said the dirt felt different now. Said it was like it remembered what it's supposed to do. He built a new sign for the trellis with a scrapboard and blue paint that dripped like tears. Wrote in careful letters, "Free produce for veterans." Then he stood back and read it aloud to himself, just to hear it out loud. I said, "You spelled it right this time." He looked over his shoulder and grinned. "Yeah, but I'm not changing the one on the fridge. The wrong one has charm." I didn't argue. That bench got more visitors in the next 2 days than my porch had in the last year. People came to talk, sure, but they sat quiet just as often. Sometimes a neighbor would leave with a tomato or a pepper or nothing at all. The point wasn't the food. Jessa asked me that evening if I was done with night shifts. "You could take a break," she said. "Catch up on sleep. Not every story needs a cab ride." I shook my head. "I like the quiet, and people talk when they don't have to see your face in the mirror." She didn't argue, just raised her lemonade like a toast. The sun was going down slow over the garden when Toby walked out barefoot, carrying the old shoebox marked, "Important." He sat next to me on the bench, pulled out a crumpled drawing, and smoothed it on his knees. It was the same one he'd made after the fire. Tin roof house, big tree, stick figures holding hands. He looked at it a second, then folded it back into the box. "We should leave this here," he said, "so it remembers." "Remembers what?" "That we put it back." I nodded, stood up, and walked to the shed. I cleared space on the top shelf, set the box down beside Dad's binder, and shut the door without saying a word. Spring came in slow this year, like it was checking the place first before settling in. The ash smell finally left the soil. I turned it over with my hands and didn't cough once. Dirt remembered what it was good for. I dragged an old card table from the shed and set it up near the trellis. Put a few tomato clippings in one crate and some early greens in another. No prices, no chalkboard. If folks wanted to leave something in return, they did. If not, they still left with something. Maris came by just after sunrise one morning, wearing a plain gray sweatshirt and cargo pants with a tear at the cuff. Her scar showed for once, stretched like an old road map across her forearm. She ran her hand down the new fence post like she was checking its heartbeat. She didn't speak for a full minute, just stood there, eyes low, palm resting against cedar. That's her way of saying, "Looks good." I told her about the bag of groceries that showed up one evening without a note, about the envelope tucked under the doormat with 20 wrinkled singles and the word soil written in pencil, about the anonymous tax payments still showing up in tiny amounts, $17 here, 32 there. She smirked. "Towns that throw stones also bake pies," she said. That afternoon, we installed the cedar bench under the sweet gum tree near the rose. I kept the wood-burn plank with no questions on it and added a small hook to hang the garden hose. Renata's board decision went in a freezer bag, waterproof and tucked inside the shed wall on a tack. Not framed, not spotlighted. Just close, so I could grab it fast if the wind ever picked up again. The county mailed me a single-page letter about Sheriff Pritchard. No signature. Just the statement, conflict of interest sustained, retirement accepted. I didn't frame that either. I read it once and stuck it in the drawer next to the utility bills. Some wins don't need confetti. They just need you to get back to work. Vance sent a final email marked professional courtesy. Talked about future collaboration and remaining open to aligned goals. I clicked archive without reading the second paragraph. There's a difference between making peace and leaving your back gate unlocked. A few days later, Lyle rolled into the drive with 2 saplings in his back seat, roots wrapped in burlap. "From the Veteran Forestry Co-op," he said. "Figured your soil's ready." Toby helped me plant them near the back fence, right where the fire line stopped. He named the first one Smith and the second Carter. "Any reason?" I asked, wiping my hands on my jeans. "They sound strong," he said, "like trees that won't let bullies win." Maris stayed long enough to help brace the trunks, then walked up to the porch and handed me a plain canvas bag. No zipper, just a flap and a pocket. Stitched onto it was the same faded unit patch she'd left months ago, the one I'd kept safe and she'd taken back. "So you won't forget where to put the important things," she said. I didn't say much, just nodded and hung it on the peg near the back door, next to Toby's sun hat and my old radio. On a slow Sunday, Joanne Lex came by in her church shoes, stepped around a muddy patch like she'd done it 100 times, and eyed the garden rows like she was grading a test. She squinted at the sprouting tomatoes, the trimmed edges, the rebuilt trellis. Then she looked at me and said, "Your father would be satisfied." I nodded. I'm trying to be the kind of neighbor he'd brag about. Quietly. She smiled. He was never quick with compliments, but he bragged plenty when nobody was listening. She walked back home with a handful of basil and didn't ask for anything in return. Tonight I'm sitting on the cedar bench, dirt still under my nails, while Toby chases lightning bugs with a plastic jar and no lid. The rows breathe different now, like a person finally letting their shoulders drop after carrying weight too long. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who got his ground back and used it the way you're supposed to, so it feeds more than one mouth. That's all my father ever expected. And if there's revenge in this, it's simple. The ones who tried to take it from us now have to drive past and see what we built without them. Hey, real quick before you scroll, have you ever had to stand your ground when someone tried to quietly take what mattered to you? If you've got hype, tapping it helps this story reach more folks who need it. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and give this video a like. It's one click, but it means a lot to us. Drop a comment too, even just good story or your thoughts. I read every single one.